want to get really depressed about the fiscal state of our country. Nobody really seems to care about the debt anymore. But I'm thinking back to the Tea Party days. You were very much a part of this, that the crowning achievement of the Tea Party was actually forcing caps on both domestic and defense spending. And it was Speaker Paul Ryan that blew up those caps because too many Republicans didn't think there should be any limits on spending for foreign policy, foreign aid, the war on terror, the black hole. What is the appropriate Republican view on foreign policy? You take a lot of flack for this, for opposing aid to Israel and opposing all these aid packages. What should that position be? And can you actually balance the budget and eliminate the debt without tackling all of this defense spending and all of these endless wars?
Well, I think, were you and I talking about this? Or so I was talking with somebody out there on the floor about this. Why don't we just, if they really need the money, if these countries really need the money, and it's true that China won't loan it to them, why don't we just co-sign the note? Instead of loaning, like right now we just give the money away, right? And we don't even make it a loan. Somebody said, well, why don't we loan it to them? Well, why do we even get in the middle of it? Just let them borrow it directly from other countries like we do, and we'll co-sign the note. That's what you would do if your kid didn't have a credit rating well enough to buy a car and they needed a car. I think the first thing you would find out is they don't really need this money. They don't want it as bad as we want to give it to them, because they wouldn't borrow it if they had to pay it back. Most of that, by the way, most of that foreign aid is actually the military industrial complex, right? They're not getting enough out of the, what are we, 800 billion or a trillion in the military budget now? I don't know exactly what it is, but it's close to $1 trillion, our military budget, if you include all of the overseas contingency operating fund. But they still, the military contractors still don't get enough out of that. So if you noticed when Afghanistan wound down, I don't agree with the way that it was ended, but at least it ended, okay? And there may not have ever been a good way to end that we shouldn't have been there for as long as we did. But as $50 billion a year tapered off there, $50 billion a year to Ukraine tapered back in, and it's the same 50 billion goes to the same military contractors. So I don't look at it, our State Department looks at all this military force and all these conflicts as diplomacy. Like the military they use as a tool in their toolbox of diplomacy. And the military contractors look at it as, you know, largesse, and they're trying to convince you that it's foreign policy, man.
Yeah. Congressman Davidson, you're a veteran, and you've been very outspoken on this particular subject. Skeptical of never-ending war. You wrote a piece recently in Responsible Statecraft that I want to ask you about specifically, but all of us have been watching our zombie president, right? And everybody's talking about blank stare and stuff, you know, introducing President Putin. That was a special moment for all of us, I think. But while we're watching that, there is some serious issues going on with the Biden administration's escalation of our position vis-a-vis Russia and Ukraine. We're getting closer and closer, and he keeps moving the line. It's very dangerous.
Yeah, I mean, look, Joe Biden, unfortunately, the world is also watching, and you know, Joe Biden's weak. That's very obvious. He's not just weak physically or mentally; he's weak in his positions in a lot of ways. And it's an unprecedented. We've closed down 11 embassies. I mean, that's unprecedented in America to close 11 embassies, and we've been essentially driven out of these places. You know, and part of it is America is not an empire. We're a republic, but only if we can keep it. To keep it, we got to restore it. I mean, we've operated a de facto empire, and you know, the United States has essentially footed the bill for the European Defense Force, and they've matched the expansion of the European Defense Force, i.e. NATO, with the expansion of the EU. We've subsidized this, and in a way, and the saying is the same as in the war on terror, as it is in Ukraine. As much as it takes, as long as it takes. Well, they never defined the mission. So I tried to put a limiting factor out there, last summer with a bill called the Define the Mission Act. And we got 129 colleagues, all Republicans, that voted for that this year. This year, people didn't want to vote because they got a little feedback off that last time. And they incorporated it into the NDAA, that they would get a mission from the Biden administration in a classified setting. It's fine. But normally that's what you do in the beginning, right? This was the old Powell doctrine, you know, or even the Stephen Covey book, you know, begin with the end in mind. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? And then I can tell you what you need. Well, what's becoming obvious, what they're trying to accomplish is an escalation and an expansion of the war, because it's never enough. They keep adding more red lines that they cross over. First, we were not going to send, you know, lethal aid. Then we were going to send lethal aid, but not tanks. Then we're going to send tanks, but not missiles that could reach into Russia. Now they've got all that. Now they've airplanes. We've got F-16s over there. We're trying to get it. So the escalation continues, and now they're debating what level of American presence to have on the ground, just to support, you know, just to support, and that's what they're doing. And to make sure that this doesn't get disrupted, they're openly taking credit for trying to Trump-proof these policies and transferring the authority and management of all this to NATO. So the chips are basically moved out of the United States into NATO, and they've already been spent.
How is that constitutional, even a little bit?
Well, the money was already appropriated in the giant slush fund that Thomas talked about. They just want to get it out of our hands because President Trump would say, I'm not distributing it, or I'm distributing it in a different way. They want to keep in control of it. And look, the whole crux of the fight in Ukraine is about NATO. And look, we ended in the dumbest way possible. You don't have to have served in the military to know that first you get the civilians out, then you get the military out. You don't do it the other way. We left in a shameful way on August 31st of 2021 from Afghanistan. And on September 1st of 2021, the United States entered into a strategic partnership agreement to support Ukraine's membership in NATO and the EU. Now that doesn't excuse what Putin did, but all along the way that fall, there was escalation after escalation. And then in February 22nd, Jens Stoltenberg, who's the Secretary General of NATO, gave a speech where he's talking about how NATO to project power around the world, including Asia. And you're like, wasn't NATO a defensive alliance? Why would you be projecting power anywhere? You guys are a defensive alliance. Literally 2 days later, February 24th, that's when Putin actually crossed the line and invaded. Still doesn't excuse his invasion, but you look, they've been working to create this war, and now they're working to expand this war, and we have to turn it off.
I want to amplify something that you just said. On his legislation, all he said was, you have to find a mission. He didn't say it has to be a good mission. He didn't say it has to be in the interest of America. He didn't say it has to be a viable mission. All he said was the White House has to give us a mission statement for Ukraine. And I am on the Rules Committee, and we forced this vote to the floor. And the Democrats, I mean, and a lot of Republicans, right, said we're not going to define it. We don't want to tie the president's hand by requiring him to tell us what he intends, how he intends for this to end up. It's ridiculous.
And no one can be held accountable if you don't have the result, right? That's how you falsely hang a mission accomplished banner somewhere.
I have proposed legislation for you guys, maybe you'll pick it up, that if you vote to continue these never-ending wars, you should commit that your sons and daughters go first.
Yeah. Well, how about this? Your congressional district pays a war tax.
Yeah.
Let's take a 30,000-foot view for a moment. So notwithstanding the value of everything that you just discussed, there are critics who argue that at this time, more than ever, it's unity that is important, or a show of unity, as every seat in the House and every seat in the Senate is so valuable and vital right now to securing back any type of power that Republicans have or the GOP has. So as we approach the presidential election, what are your thoughts on those critics who say, just save this for a second. And at this moment, please be as unified as possible, because that's the only way that we will defeat these Democrats who, while some are enjoying the chaos being sown in their party that is self-destructive, it's also not necessarily a shoe in the bag, or whatever that phrase is. It's not automatic that our success can be ensured.
Well, you know, they always, I'll quote Louis Gohmert, a former congressman. He said, we were in conference one day and John Boehner was making a play call and people were getting up set and arguing against the speaker. And somebody stood up and said, listen, when the speaker makes a decision, we all got to get behind the speaker. And Louis Gohmert leaned over to me and he said, I'm sorry, but if my quarterback snaps the ball and runs for the wrong end zone, I'm not blocking for him. In fact, I may have to tackle him. You know, unity for what? Like, if you know, if we had something like a contract, you know, Newt Gingrich's contract with America, if we had something like that we could rally behind, and we were credible in saying that we would actually do that when we got elected, I could get on board with that. But instead, what we have is another omnibus. Instead, you know, Republicans and Democrats, they talk about Republicans need to be unified, but then we have our own speaker colluding with Democrats on every bill to pass it. So,
you know, one of the things that I think President Trump is clearly the Republican nominee, and Republicans haven't had a party platform since 2016. Frankly, the party didn't want to get behind President Trump in 2016. And in 2020, they didn't. They used the pandemic as an excuse to not update the platform because a lot of the party was like, oh, good riddance. We can finally get rid of Trump. Now they're kind of coming to grips with the fact that, yeah, okay, Trump kind of is going to be our guy. And so they finally updated the platform. And you'll see people that want to hang all kinds of agenda, whatever, this, that, or the other thing, because they don't want to run against Donald Trump's agenda and Donald Trump's platform. And it is different than the Republican Party platform has been. Historically, the Republican Party platform had all kinds of provisions that lots of our colleagues in the House would say, well, you know, I can't support this. I think his pared down platform is more focused. There are things that I wish were in it that aren't, or wish were stronger in it that aren't. But it is a platform that I think everyone in the party all over the country can get behind and say, I will support that. And I think that's what we need to be able to keep the momentum. I mean, he needs to win the election. He's had pressure, including from folks in this crowd, to do good things. And I think that's going to help us win in the House races around the country. And I think it'll be able to give us the majority in the Senate. And I frankly feel most optimistic about the Senate.
Okay, let's have a little bit of fun and speculate wildly about who the Democratic nominee will actually be. Because I'm watching TV, we're all watching TV, and the Democrats have not only painted themselves in a corner, but then they dug a hole in the corner, and they're, for technical reasons,
put a brick wall around it.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris.
Yeah. So what do they do? How do they get out of this?
I just want to comment on the situation a little bit before we speculate on who it should be. But this is the party that claims to support democracy, that they're saving democracy, and that they're for the little guy. But they are undergoing a coup that's started by their donors. Like, the billionaires in the Democrat Party are taking out the duly elected nominee, and this is supposed to be the Democracy Party. Give me a break.
Well, it's even worse than that, because there could have been a Democratic primary, and every single talking head that flacks for the Democratic Party, every single Democratic operative, every Democratic leader, they're like, he's fine, he's sharp as a tack. You've all seen the video where everybody like robots says sharp as a tack, sharp as a tack. So they didn't allow for an actual Democratic primary. That should be outrageous.
It is outrageous, and look, RFK called him on it, and he's running as an independent for that reason. And you know, maybe one of the most validated guys that in politics is Phillips. He's a colleague with Thomas, and he's got a safe Democrat district in Minnesota. He's basically, I'm not going to go along with the lie. and filed a last-minute campaign, but oh, now he's a heretic. Has to excommunicate him, and they kicked him out, marginalized him in every way possible, and they didn't have a real primary. I think they should own the result. I mean, that is your nominee. The votes are controlled by Joe Biden, and that's why the family is trying to insulate Joe Biden. You essentially have a civil war going on behind the scenes with the Obama camp that has effectively run the administration so far, and the Biden family. And the Biden family doesn't want to lose what little grip of power they have left. But even like they can't have confidence in Joe Biden, clearly. People have even less confidence in Kamala Harris than they have in Joe Biden. The policies are what produce the results. The results are terrible, so you can't have confidence in the policies or the results. So what could Democrats possibly have confidence in? And I think a lot of people are going, well, their ability to rig elections, And that's why, Trump says it's going to be too big to rig. It has to be too big to rig. And they keep Joe Biden on the ballot, even if they're confident in their ability to rig elections, it at least has to be close enough to be believable, right? And there's no way. There are people that still don't trust 2020. But at this point, if the election were today or right after that last debate, everybody knows, yeah, we can't really make that believable.
We are in Las Vegas, and therefore I will note the predictive nature as well of a similar question, which is Vegas odds currently predict that J.D. Vance will be the vice president alongside Trump on the ticket. The Republican National Convention coverage begins tomorrow, starts officially this week. So do either of you have predictions as to who the vice president pick will be?
Well, the reason those predictive markets work is insider trading. And that's why I have faith in it. I mean, if you were the receptionist for J.D. Vance and arranged a phone call with the president yesterday, you would find somebody in Vegas to place that bet for you, right? And the odds would start moving. So if it is true, it's because of insider trading. He would be a great pick.
If anyone's wondering, second currently is Berger, and third is via Vegas odds. I'm reporting.
I wouldn't bet against J.D. Vance.
Yeah. And look, J.D. Vance has done great with his start in the Senate. But I think one of the things that makes him appealing is he's a very good spokesperson for the president, but he's also, I think, shows that Donald Trump is a guy that doesn't always hold a grudge. J.D. Vance was very at odds with Donald Trump. And he was able to reconcile and not just build a good relationship with President Trump, but either way, at least be on his short list, but maybe as vice president.
Well, I happen to be Team Vivek or Team Tulsi, which means there's no way it happened.
You could, I mean, Trump could wrap up this election and own it if he would just name Tulsi Gabbard vice president.
Yeah. So, assuming that the Democrats don't rig it, does Trump win? I guess that's a big assumption.
Yeah, I mean, I feel pretty optimistic at this point, which is kind of scary. You look at it and feel like, yeah, I feel pretty good. But look, I mean, he's going to do well in the South. He's going to do well in all the traditional states. And you're going to look at some of the same states, like Georgia maybe could be in play. North Carolina maybe could be in play. West Virginia isn't going to be in play. Pennsylvania is, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, Arizona. I mean, it's a handful of states that are really, really, truly going to be at risk. Hopefully we get high turnout everywhere. And we'll see that we do well in the popular vote. And I think that's part of the play with J.D. Vance on the ballot.
Okay, let's give it up for these guys. Emily, Congressman Davidson.
For what it's worth, everyone on this stage is nominal vice presidential pick, because then you'd be president once and twice. Thank you all. Beautifully done. I love it. I love talking a horse race. I love that we're in Vegas. Who's actually going to put money down on one of those candidates? I will put some money down that our three next speakers, this panel, will shoot to the very top of your top 5 lists And I want to hear about it. Does anyone else want to share, make an amendment to their top 5, their top moments so far at Freedom Fest? I know you're taking notes. I know I'm talking to the people in the room who will stay, who will ask, who will drill down, and who will take away the most from Freedom Fest. So I don't want to share. Okay, there you go. The charitable arm of Freedom Fest. That was your favorite part. Freedom Fest is very charitable, and I appreciate it. They're very charitable with freedom. All right, let's hear, if power concedes nothing without a demand, then we demand freedom. Please welcome former Harvard professor and professor emeritus at Princeton, Dr. Cornell West, former Libertarian candidate for governor in the great state of New York, Larry Sharpe, also a Marine, and solutionary hip hop artist and founder of Black Guns Matter, Maj Toure, gentlemen.
Most of us would agree that the powers that be don't just randomly say, you know what, take our power, we're good. They don't do that. You've got to somehow demand it. But when we want to demand something as the people, we have to think to ourselves, if we're asking for freedom, are we asking for freedom to do something, a freedom to be something, or are we asking a freedom from something so that we don't have to handle or deal with something, some freedom from, either one. And in either case, you can see an argument for it. I do want freedom from being murdered, of course, but I also want freedom to travel as I see fit to travel. I want both of those. But in each case, we may affect somebody else's freedom from to and from. And I guess my question is, how do we balance that? Any comments on how do we balance that freedom to versus freedom from?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
You balance it by first exposing it.
Okay.
You gotta be a two-pronged approach. Like you said, there are people that are going to try to snatch your freedoms away, which means that you have to be more adamant about the freedoms that you're defending. And it kind of has to be unapologetic. And if you leave one section of that conversation out, if you only talk about I want the freedom to, without acknowledging who are these beings attempting to try to take this freedom, you leave yourself open on one side. So it has to be a full, robust conversation when you're initially just explaining it. If you do one without the other, you leave yourself open.
Do you then create, though, the idea that if I spend too much, if I'm too unapologetic about freedom too, do I come across to so many people as, you're just selfish, right? I want the freedom too, and I'm so unapologetic. Do I risk coming across as selfish?
That's the conversation of empathy in your approach.
Okay.
If I'm saying and expressing, I understand your perspective and your freedoms, I'm just from a loving place and an empathetic place explaining to you what my freedoms are, and here's how yours are attacked as well. That person or that group of people start to understand that you're not just saying it from that self-centered place. I recognize that your thirst for freedom may be a little bit different than mine, but at the same time, you have ones that, again, those same entities are attempting to try to neutralize.
Okay. You see how they, sorry about that. First, I want to say I'm blessed to be here, and I want to salute my dear brother Mark and Matt and Val for facilitating our conversation. And it was this brother's birthday yesterday, so let's wish him a happy birthday.
I'm 21 now. I can throw away my fake ID. Perfect. Yes.
No, I think part of the challenge, though, is where that empathy comes from. You see, part of the discussion, so much in political theory, is freedom from and freedom for, but that's external freedom. I'm as much concerned with internal freedom, inner freedom. Where does self-respect come from? Where does the caring of others come from? Where does the concern for others come from? Where does self-regard come from? Because you can give somebody all the freedom in the world, but if their soul craft is underdeveloped, it becomes gangster-like because they're bringing gangster-like sensibilities to their freedom. So if you don't have civic virtue, all the freedom in the world just means you're gonna have a Hobbesian war of all against all. So you gotta talk about the context in which people are shaped and molded as human beings in our short moves from mama's womb to tomb. And what goes into that? Well, you got to have quality relations, quality family, quality community. You got to have stories and narratives and visions that you internalize to get you out of your egoism and narcissism. And then you say, it's freedom from and freedom for. So that all the talk about liberty, this is Frederick Douglass now. We're talking about Douglass. This is August 3rd, 1857, where he's talking about what? Moral power, moral struggle. That's Martin Luther King Jr., that's Fannie Lou Hamer, that's Rabbi Heschel, that's Edward Said. And it cuts across ideology, it cuts across politics. Every school of thought has their gangsters and thugs. Every school of thought can have some persons with integrity, even if I think they're wrong. I think both of these brothers might be wrong on something. They've got to be.
Never.
Got to be.
Never.
I'm wrong on something too. But if we don't have a trust based on an integrity, we can't go anywhere.
Nice.
We can't go anywhere.
So maybe I've made an error in my dichotomy. Maybe it isn't necessarily freedom from or freedom to. Maybe it can be either of those as long as I'm thinking about the other, the empathy, and I should be thinking freedom for. Maybe that's, did I make an error in that?
No,
I was wrong again. Thank you. Wrong. He was right the whole time. Okay. Yes.
I wouldn't say it's wrong. I would say in addition to.
Okay.
Right? I'm not trying to, okay, I want to build this relationship with this pyramid, this freedom pyramid. I know what that pyramid looks like, but I got to go foundation, then I got to go brick, then I got to go brick, then I got to go brick. Now I got another layer, now I got to go brick. So it's in addition to. I think that the mistake becomes that it has to be either or.
Okay.
So, that either or conversation is what they're usually going to lean into you with. Oh, so you mean to tell me your freedom to own firearms supersedes my freedom to exist and be healthy and well and so forth and so on. I understand that that's the binary position that they're going to take. Our job is to give them more in addition to. That is how you kind of like tactically utilize the empathy. I'm not adversarial towards you. You're a human. You're an American. We're just struggling around this issue. And I want to add, I want to build, I want to add on to the situation and keep them, not keep, but kind of like pull them out of that binary.
So, Dr. West, does the freedom for, does that by default almost make you not selfish? So as I'm saying, I want this freedom for this group that I may be part of, or even that I'm not part of, right? Even more important, I want freedom for this group to or from, that's not my group, because it's right, because they're American, because they are something I'm not. Does that make it even stronger, or am I going too far?
Well, it depends on the depth of the quality of your morality and spirituality. You got to get beyond the tribalism. You got to get beyond even the nationalism. Human beings are human beings. I speak as a Christian, so I believe every human being is made in the image and likeness of a mighty God who has a certain sanctity and dignity across the board. Okay, that for me, every flag is under the cross for me. I get that Shiloh Baptist Church. I'm holding on to that. I'm going to be faithful unto death. But I also recognize that we're in national experiments so that we have fellow citizens. You got 192 countries in the world that have citizens, and they have their own traditions and so forth. But I would hope that we have enough depth in our morality and spirituality that we can embrace humanity as a whole. And we should never forget. I mean, anybody who talks about liberty ought to read and reread the Grand Inquisitor at least once a year. There, Dostoevsky argues what? Most human beings actually do not have the capacity to bear freedom. They'd rather be fed, led, and drilled. It takes courage to really want to be free, intellectually, like Socrates, spiritually, like Jesus of Nazareth, who weeps and Socrates never sheds a tear. Ooh, there's a difference there. Intellectual courage, spiritual courage, moral courage, political courage, and then we have a political conversation about our differences. But if there's no courage, which is the enabling virtue of all the other virtues, Plato lays this out in the Euthyphro. He's right. He's right. And when you live in a culture where courage itself is pushed to the margins, and it's all about expediency, opportunism, short-term gain, you're going to end up with a highly gangsterized and polarized society, which is in many ways where we are today. It's a spiritual crisis.
It's a good point. I think
It's a moral crisis.
with that crisis, I think that, go ahead, please, clap. Yes, please. With that, I'd actually go one step further. I think as we see this happen, people not only would accept the benevolent king, they beg for it.
Oh,
They ask for a benevolent king, right? They're like, oh, I just got to be saved from the other because everybody's bad. Please, if there only was a good king or queen, if there was a good monarch, right, then I'd be okay. They almost beg for it. Am I wrong here?
No, you're not wrong. And we're being propagandized into that reality. Right now, we're seeing the unofficial fourth wing of the government, the media, most effective devil in America. Got that from Malcolm. We're seeing in most recent memory, when we're talking about 2020, we had a media propagandize people and tell them, you have to close your business, right? And almost people in the beginning were submissive to that, almost attacking fellow Americans, attacking other humans by saying, if you don't acquiesce to what big government, that monarchy says, then you are my enemy.
I live in New York City. That actually happened.
Right.
We weren't almost there. We were there.
Right.
100%.
So the general public, via the propaganda machine, was almost turning on its own citizens, saying, we're going to rat you out because you don't want to do this. You want my grandmother to die. And asking for that, and conveniently having a president that will show up and say, I don't care if I'm dementia riddled. I don't care if this happens. I'm your guy, and that's what's going to happen, period. Regardless of what is cabinet, regardless of what Americans, regardless of the actual facts of reality, I'm the guy. They are literally trying to propagandize us and lean us through these political choices, at least on a federal level, to asking for comfortable slavery.
Got it. Yes, it's true.
Wait, I want to say this too. It's your fault though.
Uh-oh, he just yelled at you guys.
It's your fault.
That's not.
Watch how awkward it gets. You do not want to accept the reality of the importance of the Second Amendment in the Constitution. You have been fed a barrel of lies, a blank check for government in the form of back the blue, just as silly as some of you in the room would say, those people that say vote blue no matter who, you collectively accepted back the blue without question. Ask for more government. When was the last time you opened your Constitution and shared the information with people that don't look like you? You are complicit in asking for your slavery.
Yeah, slavery. Oh, wait, right.
You go direct. I mean, part of it too. I mean, it's roughly the same number of people in Canada as California. More Californians kill each other with knives than Canadians kill each other with anything. So that's culture.
Yes.
Yes, something about the role of violence and what it means to be an American. The frontier is our dominant myth. Moral generation through violence with barbarians, our precious indigenous people on one hand, and civilized folk on the other. Civilized in terms of treatment of indigenous, what we're talking about here. The same is true in terms of slavery of black folk. We know how violent that was. The average slave died in 27 years, over 244 years every generation. My God, the violence toward women with male egos being so insecure, you got to come home because you don't want to confront the boss. And I'm not talking about any brothers in here, but there's some men out there that gave it this kind of ugly treatment. Absolutely. So your point is I think, crucial, but if we put it in a broader context, because keep in mind, I mean, Plato argued in a republic, no democracy can survive because the demos will be driven by unruly passion and pervasive ignorance and will call for a tyrant. Will call for it. That's Plato. Now, Plato's wrong in his conclusion. Plato ought to be sitting in each one of our closets because that's one of the fundamental challenges. Now, how do you deal with the unruly passion? You got moral cultivation. You got spiritual formation. You got people who say, I am hated, I will love. It's like Emmett Till's mother, what did she say when her baby was sitting there in Chicago? 14 years old, his head 5 times the size of his ordinary head. She said, what? I don't have a minute to hate. I will pursue justice for the rest of my life. What kind of spiritual formation goes into that kind of mother response to her child who's been terrorized? It doesn't fall from the sky. It comes from rich traditions that teach people how to love, how to be concerned with others, how to love their neighbor, not just the neighbor next door, but in every corner of the globe. They can be in Iran, they can be in Ethiopia, they could be in Spain, they can be in London, and so forth. And that means you have to cut against the grain. I mean, one of the reasons why I think FreedomFest is important, even given my own deep political and ideological differences, is you unleash Socratic energy.
Yes.
Unleash it. Think critically for yourself. And you unleash spiritual energy. You care for a variety of different people across the board. And we can argue later about Adam Smith versus Karl Marx versus Joseph Trumpeter versus John Maynard Keynes and so forth and so on. But we enter the space, we enter this public space with a certain kind of formation. And then we agree or disagree, mediated with respect as long as we can. And we're losing this. This is why this moment of spiritual decay, moral decadence is so overwhelming. I mean, my advice to both Trump and Biden is to read King Lear. You need to read King Lear. What is King Lear about? It's about a king, powerful, full of hubris, who becomes a decent, loving human being as a result of undergoing serious suffering. That's Shakespeare at his deepest. And how old is Lear? 80 and upward.
So let me go there.
Interesting.
Yes, we went there. So let's me now with the next question, which is, okay, if we decided we're going to demand freedom, we know what kind we're going to demand. Who are we demanding it from? Are we demanding this freedom from our government, federal government, local government? Are we demanding it from corporations, powerful entities? Are we demanding it from our communities or our families or even ourselves? Who are we demanding it from? Like, we can say, oh, I want this, that's awesome, but who am I talking to? Who am I trying to persuade? Or who am I trying to make the change?
As with most things, it's layered, and it's all of those things, right? We had this conversation where it's like, oh, it's everybody, it's just black and white.
Right.
And then you're like, no, it's not. No, it's not, right? So I think it's all of those things. In the book, New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, she talked about how racism, scary word, guys, all right?
I'm scared.
Right. She talked about how racism is intelligent and it changes. And just because I wanted to lock a specific group up and utilize their labor without pay, I may not call it slavery now, we may be called the prison industrial complex later on. That wording changes and how the approach changes. So just like anything that's as evil as racism, as evil as tyranny, as evil as whatever, you have to be equally evolved in your understanding of its evolution to come up with a holistic approach, because it's going to utilize the new thing that's presented to you as a tool of liberation.
But what you said, I agree with. My worry is that seems almost overwhelming, right? I'm one organization, or I'm one person, or I'm one group. What should I even be starting on? I mean, that's a lot.
No, it's right where you at.
Okay.
It's right where you at. Like, we're not looking at the green grass across the street. Green is under my feet. So I just want to start right where I'm at with what my skill set is. Okay.
Yes, under your feet.
Right?
Yes.
So if my skill set is basic firearms training, I am not a long distance firearms trainer. I am not. But some of the people that come through our classes will aspire and emulate those people and go follow that. If I start them on that path and then give them a safe and responsible understanding of that situation, that tide gonna take them where that tide take them. And then figuring out and accepting that all of these areas of human activity, all of the entities that you named are all involved. They are involved in government. They are involved in politics. They are involved in media, and they use them simultaneously when beneficial. If it wasn't the case, we wouldn't have a Twitter files explaining, or Facebook files, or insert whatever, hey, government conspired with this silly TikTok thing that, oh, no one's really paying attention to. Government conspired and operated through that to silence the people. And that's a corporation. So it's always going to be, you know, a blend of how the approach is.
So you're actually talking about building communities.
Right. You have to.
But it has to be, when you say multi-layered, I agree with you wholeheartedly. But there's so many roads to serfdom. I think Hayek's got his story about one particular road, the powerful argument. There's a lot of different roads to serfdom. Anytime you have highly centralized power, using that power in an arbitrary way that's violating the precious humanity and dignity of the liberties of persons, you've got an authoritarian rule. It can be government, it can be big corporations, it could be churches, it could be mosques, it could be synagogues, it could be families. I mean, you know, some of them might have matriarchs and patriarchs. We love deeply, but a little bit too authoritarian sometimes. You know? So well, what's going on? Well, it's because we are a wretched species. Most of our history is the history of organized greed and weaponized hatred and routinized indifference toward the vulnerable. And it's these precious moments of interruption, with a love, a grin, a hug, a friendship. Democracy itself is an interruption. That's why it's so fragile in human history. It tends not to last that long, because the demos doesn't want to cultivate themselves morally and spiritually in order to sustain it, because they get seduced by the golden calf. And if you view life as a gold rush, you're going to end up worshiping the golden calf, and the golden rule becomes he who has the gold rules. And we're right back to Hobbes' war of all against all. That's why our great writers, Melville's Moby Dick, what is that about? The self-destruction of America because of Ahab's greed. The Pequot is a symbol of the country. There's some decent people on the Pequot, just like there's decent people in America. But if they become weak and impotent and frustrated and feel as if their voices are not heard, then a tyrant can easily emerge. No doubt about that. The same is true with Great Gatsby. Same is true with The Iceman Cometh, Eugene O'Neill, Toni Morrison's Beloved. We look to our artists. We look to our musicians. Stephen Sondheim, then Louis Armstrong, talking about what? Somehow we're going to confront catastrophe in an honest way, but we're not going to allow that catastrophe to have the last word. Here's a little love. Listen to Lucia. Nobody loves me but my mama, and she might be jiving too. That's the king of the blues. That's catastrophic. That's like Antigone. Everything's against you, but you got a song in your heart anyway. You got some love that hasn't been snuffed out, hasn't been eliminated. How do you pass that on? And so we have to be very honest in terms of our larger history as human beings. We're talking about who we are as human beings. There's a worse than the wretchedness, and there's something wonderful about us too. Our capacity to love, capacity to love.
What is funny here is I talked about the idea of, you know, big government or big corporations, and both of you acknowledge that's a problem. Both of you acknowledge it's an issue, we have to worry about it. Both of you in a different way, though, came back to one thing: community and family. You still came down to the individual, to the family, to the community. So while it is important to deal with the big, we have to deal with the small. Right? We still do. And I think sometimes with the individual, we think my example is not good enough. Right? Okay, so I did it, so what? But I think unless I'm reading you wrong, you're saying the opposite. You're saying your example is what's going to change. Am I reading you wrong?
No, you're 100% right. That example of, I mean, there's a young man out there, and I don't know if he's out there, a young man named Steven. What's up, Steven? Right? Steven started watching our content and making, you know, Black Lives Matter and the work, right? 3 years ago. He's a teenager. He's got a job. He's talking about building, you know, 3D printed firearms, safe and responsible. His mom is there. I got to get a job because I got to pay for these things. I have passion about this. Hey, my friend over here, he might be kind of a jerk. These are things. We hung out at the booth. Guys, go over to the booth, 201W, get some t-shirts. My point in saying that is, I met Stephen here at FreedomFest. For 3 years, he's been watching the content and creating this Second Amendment understanding, this patient, this tolerant, this evaluating, this courageous. Let me go up to Maj, let me have this conversation, because of an individual choice that I made, and we all make that decision. After a certain point of doing a thing, you start to accept what you're saying as absolutely true. But I think that people in the beginning that may not have platforms or think they don't have platforms feel as if that individual choices and my actions aren't inspiring. That's the reason why they try to make fun of influencers.
Okay.
I want to make fun of you as an influencer because, oh, you're just an influencer. That's all the entire world is shaped by influencers. So if I know that that's a power and I can use my media skillfully or my government to silence the influencers that might have one phone, one laptop, one book, and they're sharing that information all across the world, of course our opposition's job is to convince us that that's your little job, your little company, you're a little influencer, you're a little hip hop artist. That one individual, as the founders and others knew, that one individual has the power to change the world, and I contend those people are even more powerful now with the advent of social media, technology, internet, than we may give ourselves credit for. So 100% has to start with that individual.
This is the butterfly effect, right? Yeah, the butterfly effect. So the individual does matter. The local family and community is the key now.
Absolutely. I mean, how could we even proceed without accenting the dignity of individuality?
Well,
That's the value.
It does get kind of erased in our point.
But that's very different than rapacious individualism.
Okay.
Rapacious individualism tends to snuff out the moral and the spiritual dimension. It becomes just survival of the slickest. But individuality is about how do I, in light of the gift that I have, cultivate them in light of a calling that I have, not just a career, but a vocation that I have, that I'm going to be faithful unto death and do it in such a way that it has integrity, honesty, and decency. We're living in a country now that have integrity, honesty, and decency makes you a revolutionary. Because you're cutting so radically against the grain. What's at the center of it so often is just manipulation, transaction. I don't want to transact, I want to be transformed. I want to be elevated. I'm going to fall on my face, so what? Samuel Beckett said, what? Try again, fail again, fail better. That's our lives. We try again, we fail again, we fail better. T.S. Eliot says, ours is in the trying, the rest is not our business in the four quartets, right? The brother's right about that. He's not right about everything, but he's right about that. Oh my God. But what happens when those kind of insights are pushed to the margin, and then you have a younger generation that no longer has contact with the best of its own history? And that's one of the things that I talk about on my campaign, all I want to do is reintroduce America to the best of itself. Martin King is not a God, he's not a deity, but he represents the best of himself, and he is as American as the Ku Klux Klan.
Wow. Yes.
One leans toward love, and the other leans toward hatred. But there's hatred inside of each and every one of us. There's greed inside of each and every one of us. And we got to kill it every day. And that's why Christians have to die daily. How do you die? Daily. That's what Paul says. I think Paul's right about that.
This is the part that I like what you said so many times. You said, this person's right about that. This person's right about that. This person's right about that. Isn't that amazing? So that you could finding something from each and saying, here's where I agree, because what you just did, and I think both of you just did, is you showed two things that I think is the key to making this change. One, empathy.
Yes.
But the second, respect. Right? Those two, I feel, are the way we're going to make changes. And both of you, there's entire conversation have covered both of those two issues. Empathy and respect at a local level.
Yes.
People aren't talking about that. So if we're going to demand freedom, whether it's freedom to, freedom from, freedom for, whatever that might be, we've got to do it with both empathy and respect.
Absolutely.
I think that's it.
I agree. Can I just add one thing on this?
Please, go ahead.
Truth.
True. Okay, yes.
Truth. No one has a monopoly on truth. But
Yeah.
one condition of truth is to allow suffering to speak. Never know the truth about yourself unless you come to terms with your suffering. If you're denying your own suffering, you can rest be assured you're living a half lie at best. Same is true with a nation. Same is true with the history of the species. And truth is always jagged edge. It's Janet's face. It cuts in a variety of different ways. It cuts at us. People come up to me all the time. Brother West, we appreciate you speaking the truth to power. I said, oh, really, thank you very much. But I'm trying to speak the truth to everybody, relatively powerless. Most importantly, I'm trying to speak the truth to myself.
Yes. Yes.
That's most difficult oftentimes. So empathy, yes. It's like Middlemarch. George Eliot, that's the great novel of empathy, right?
Absolutely.
But George Eliot always talks about the truth. That's that silence, that roar on the other side.
I love it.
You know what I mean? So all three of those, is that
Y'all don't try to get me to add one because y'all not gonna like. I can't say it eloquent like y'all.
Oh, yes, you do. You
Get me to say another one.
You got your own eloquence, brother.
All right, I'll say it.
Right.
The potential for violence.
Yes. Sure. Yes. And we should accept that. I agree. We accept truth, potential for violence, absolutely. But that can be lessened with both empathy and respect. Thank you all so much. I appreciate it.
Let's hear for Larry, Maj, and Dr. Cornell. Doctor.
Hi, everyone. I know you paid for the whole